Hello, I'm Michael Redmond, professional 9-dan Go player. In this video, I'll be looking at the 12th round of the 25th Nongshim Cup. For those of you who want to think about the game itself immediately, you can look at this position I'm showing here. It's a point where white has a Tetsuji on the left side of the board, so you can look at the lower left quarter of the board and look for a good move for white. Okay, so the tournament is a tournament with 3 teams, a Chinese, Korean, and Japanese team of 5 players each. And Xie Erhao of China did very well. He had 7 straight wins. And at that point, there were only 1 Korean and Japanese player each. So he had eliminated most of the Korean and Japanese players, and all 5 Chinese players were still participating. Shin Jinseo finally defeated him in round number 9. And then round 10, where Shin Jinseo defeated Iyama. That was my last video. And now we're at round number 12. And he's playing his 3rd Chinese opponent, who is Ke Jie. Ke Jie was always one of my favorite players. He was a world champion for a while, and he was the person who challenged AlphaGo for the 2nd time. That was after Lee Sedol. His haircut has changed. I don't know if that's working, so you can tell me in the comments. So now to get into the Go. Black started with a 3-3 point and a 3-4 point with a Shimari. So Ke Jie is black, and he's playing an opening that is strong in territory. So he's going for the territory. Yes, and when white cuts here, there's a ladder involved in this Joseki if black plays here. And if black plays the normal Joseki, then a lot depends on whether this ladder is good for white. So this ladder, if we just imagine the white stones chasing the black stones, it'll end up with stones going diagonal like that. It looks like it maybe might hit that black stone at the 3-3 point, but white finishes the ladder by moving through the Q line there, going straight at the very end of the ladder. And the ladder works for white. When the ladder is good for white, this Joseki is usually it's good for white. So like it's usually played by black when the ladder favors black. So he captured the 1 stone. That makes sense to me. And he captured. So at this point, white had 2 moves that I would call Joseki. White could play the solid connection. Or white could play the Kaketsugi here, the hanging connection. In which case black would play an extension on the side. White would probably play here. This might be even an opening that had been researched by the players to a certain degree. Apparently it's fairly even. Shin Jinseo did not play the hanging connection, and he extended. So this is slightly unusual. It diverges from the opening, the Joseki that is, and black had an opportunity to cut on the left side. So in the game, black cut on the 3rd line, went after territory. It would have been better if black had cut on the 4th line and started a fight. So in this fight, black would have some potential to dominate the local fight, although it is a very difficult fight to judge what's going to happen next, because it could get a bit exciting. In the game, black cut on the 3rd line, and this is big as far as territory is concerned, although I would call it slightly over-concentrated. And that's because the territory, let's use the pen. So the territory that black is getting here is attached to a group that was already alive. So it doesn't have the added value of creating a living group because black was living already. And so it's just the territory. In this case, maybe it wasn't as good as cutting on the 4th line was. So white played here, and white curled around. This was a point where white could have played the Tetsuji on the left side. So this was the problem that I posed at the beginning of this video. If you want to think about it a bit more, you can pause the video here and come back to see me give you the answer, which I'm about to do right now. So it's your last chance to pause the video. The Tetsuji was to play here. So this is the Tetsuji, which is going to play a forcing move against the black stones while white can. And again, the fact that this black group is completely alive figures into it, because white wants to play this early when it's less ideal for black to be sort of ignoring it. So like when black plays here, this is clearly a good exchange. So it's an exchange of a stone on the third line for a stone on the second line. And later on, if black jumps in here and we get into a fight like this, that stone at 1, in some cases, it's going to come into play. So there are some cases where you can see white sort of linking up like this, and that stone at 1 is in a very effective point. It's making a difference. On the other hand, if black plays something on the top, this would actually be countered by this. And again, in this variation, it would be very similar to the previous one, in which case white would have this move. So white would have the option of playing here and closing off the center. So this would be efficient for white too. So this was a good point for white to play this forcing move. Just to show one more variation, jumping out at 2 for black is actually a very real possibility. But at this stage, white still does have a local advantage. That's why white should be playing at 1 early when white still has a local advantage in a fight like this. So this would just be a very difficult fight for black at this point, but that's going to be changing as soon as black starts to play some local moves. So black jumped in. So this already changes that idea. So white played away. Even if white plays here now, there's already the possibility of something like this happening. And for instance, something like this would it start to look a bit dangerous for white. So you can see how that one extra move, the extra stone at h4, is making a huge difference in this kind of fight. So black jumped in, and white actually played away. So when white did that, this was an opportunity for black to do something like that, just to keep on playing. I think winning the local fight, the fight in the lower left, winning that fight is very important for black. And black's corner, the lower right corner is actually it's pretty safe. It's not in great danger. So black answered that. And now white played here. So again, when white plays this after black's invasion at h4, after black has this stone, there was a real possibility that black would be playing something like this. And taking advantage of the fact that white's attachment here, this move was a bit later maybe than it should have been. But black simply answered. This made it relatively easy for white. So it might look a bit counterintuitive to see white playing that attachment underneath. What white is doing is basically this group had a very strong black group on the other side of it. So it was fairly weak. So white is actually trying to make 2 eyes for the living space for this group. So if black plays here, white's just going to play this exchange first, which gives white a block of territory here, which is making a living position. And then white can play here. And again, we're seeing the idea of linking up to the left side with something like this, in which case this exchange, it was working very well for white. Without that, black would have started to break through on the left side. So there's a kind of a loose connection there that's working very well for white. So black actually left that. So black started a fight on the right side. And white actually played an Atari. So extending at this point was, of course, it was possible, but it wouldn't be the ideal shape. So white played here, and played an Atari to get the hanging connection, which is a much better shape than the other one. There was a chance there for black to play here. So this would have been a completely different variation. Maybe better for black, because that white group on the side is not alive. So if we have white play just simply like this, then black would be able to kill it. White does have some aji, not really the cut here. So the cut here is going to be a ladder, but white can clamp here and try to connect underneath. So that's what white would be trying to do with this attachment at 8. And if black answered it, then white would be able to connect up. So this would let white off the hook. This would connect up, having an eye in this area, and then another eye in this area. So that's alive. Or if black went down with 13, This looks like it's just going to be something like this would kill the black group. So that's not a good idea for black. So black would, going back to this point, black would probably play on this side and would capture that group on the side. It's not alive. And white would be getting the top side. This is probably better than the game for black. It would be slightly better. You do have to remember that this is a ponuki. There's a proverb that says the ponuki is 30 points. In a case like this, where the ponuki sort of dominates the center of the board, it is close to that. It is a big position that white gets there. So I'd say the game is more or less even, but maybe this was better for black. It was slightly better. In the game, black extended, and white played a hanging connection. And the fact that white had this strong position here, it made the next attack that white might play against the right side much more effective. The idea is that if black plays on this side, then this becomes a white territory, and white would be moving out like this, and would not be really getting in much trouble. And the important thing is that white's group on the bottom side is alive now. So black tried something a bit more tricky, and white just sort of ignored it. So white could have played here, and it would have been a more tricky variation. Black could try something like this, and would have enough room to live. And white would be okay on the outside also. So this would be one variation they could have played. Shin Jinseo just simply sacrificed the group on the right. So when he sacrifices that, he's going to have some forcing moves somewhere around here. Some moves around here will be threatening to revive that white group. So he's sacrificing it, giving black some territory in return for having a degree of control over what happens in the local area, and to get sente. Sente is always important, and it's important in this case because white gets to invade the right side. So this is where Shin Jinseo started to take control of the game. Black has been playing for territory, but the territory here, it's very low. It's low down on the third line. And so it's only slightly more than 10 points. So it's 10 to 15 points. Black has another territory here, which is more like 30 points. So those are the two black territories. And you can expect blacks can get something in the top right corner. White only has this territory and this territory. I guess I could call that a territory. So white is behind in territory, but the fact that black has these weak stones here, and the white stones adjacent to them, for instance, this group, it already has one eye here, and it has other places where it can make eyes. It also has, once white pushes at this point, the triangle, then it will be very difficult for black to chase that group. So the white group is actually stronger than you might think. It's a fairly strong group. So black plays the capping move. And so white cuts here. So he's actually allowing the black group to escape and creating another strong white group. So now this white group, it already has an eye here, which is pretty difficult for black to try to take away. So like the black move that would try to do that would be this one, but it gets cut off. So this isn't really working for black. So white already has that eye there in this point, and other places that white can make an eye. So it's already a strong group. And yes, this peep here is threatening the cut here. It's not going to work yet. So if white tries this, black will be able to push through here. So that would be a bad idea. But the fact that there's that threat there means that almost any move in the vicinity is going to be a forcing move for white. So that served to reinforce this group by basically establishing the fact that it was already outside into the center. So that group is strong, and the black group is eyeless. So white continued by cutting it off from the upper right corner. And after this, Shin Jinseo just completely controls the game. So looking at this, it was a very natural sequence I'm just going to go back quickly to this point where black cut and extended. I think already after black plays this, Shin Jinseo has a positional advantage, and he kept the positional advantage. You might say he established it at somewhere around this point where he had already settled the bottom side, and black was already confined to relatively small areas. And then finally, when white sacrificed these stones, and black ended up with Gote, capturing them. Actually, arguably, black should have been playing something like this on the right side, which would be a more sedate game. It would allow white to connect on the bottom side, after which it would be back to an opening where black would be playing on the top side probably. But when black ended with Gote here, and white started to attack on the right side, it looks like black just lost control of the fight. And with white's groups, all of them were pretty efficiently alive, and black had to run out into the center. It was just very difficult for black to take control back. And his lead in territory wasn't really big enough to justify this. So black has something like 50 points. Like if we count 30 points here, and it's more than 10 points, but 10 points each here. So that's a good 50 points plus a little extra. So all of these territories look like they might be a bit larger than what I've given them. And white only has something 10 to 15 points here, maybe. It's not really established completely. And then you would expect some white territory there. And then there's not really much more. So black does have a sizable lead in territory, but he's going to spend the rest of the game defending this weak group. And we'll see how it turns out. So white's starting to surround the top side. White's going to get some territory there. This was forcing against the left side. So black found an interesting way to answer that, and he's eliminating some of the forcing moves in this general area, and he can still cut white off on the side. So that's, if white had played here, then black would have played here. So white played here, black played here. This actually captures the white group. So white was just getting a squeeze. So these 2 points will be forcing, and sometimes white can squeeze from above also. Okay, so white goes back to the attack here. We have to remember that there's a cut, a kind of a pending cut here, which means that, for instance, connecting, usually pushing also, but there's a lot of forcing moves in regards to the cut. So that's why white can play what might look like a loose shape, and black got rid of the bad aji. And white's group here, it's really pretty strong. So for instance, if white wanted to live with this group on the right, white could play here and here, and white would have 2 eyes after this. So just on the right side there, white has a way to make 2 eyes. And it means that since white is already out into the center, it's almost, you might say it's pretty much alive as it stands. It's very difficult for black to even think of attacking this white group. So white continues the attack. One important point is white's not trying to kill the black group. So that's a mistake that some people might make. It's more important for white to establish the territory in the upper left area, and he's going to continue surrounding the left side. He's harrying the black group. It doesn't have 2 eyes, doesn't even have 1 eye at this point. And so white's chasing it, and in the meantime, white is getting that territory in the upper left area. So now black's group is looking fairly safe, and white has also finished off that territory in the upper left. And that's about it. So after this, it's just an endgame. So it was, you might think it's relatively peaceful even. It was positionally white just took control of the game and took it away. So he got a positional advantage fairly early in the game. So let's put the result out, because it turns out it was only 2.5 points. So I'll put the result up on the right there. It was only 2.5 points. So I should add that having a perfect endgame is probably important also. But let's just take the game to the end. So this is just, they're playing the big endgame moves in order, I suppose. And there's not really any chance for black. So even though it's a fairly close game, it's come to the point where just about any professional player could take it to the end, I think. Okay, so they played it to the very end of the game. And they're filling the half-point ko's. And that's it. So they, they filled all the dames. And this white won by 2.5 points. I think it all happened here in the bottom side. So like in this first fight, at this point, white is pretty much in control. And then at this point where white has sacrificed that lower right area, white starts to control the whole board. And so I think the control that was displayed in this game was very interesting, and I learned from it. So thank you for watching to the end, and I'll be back with the final game of the Nongshim Cup in my next video.